Hi everybody, and welcome to Once Upon a Scarf. This channel celebrates the art of the vintage scarf, from luxury silks to bandanas, and takes a deep dive into the wonderful stories they tell. I'm the author of 2 classic books on vintage fashion, Secondhand Chic and It's Vintage Darling. I'm a huge fan of the affordability, luxury, and style of great vintage scarves. I'd love to share what I know with you. Today, we're looking at a classic vintage scarf by the great Emilio Pucci. He's been called the Prince of Prints, creating a unique visual vocabulary of color, motif, and incredible swinging 60s vibe. You can almost always spot a Pucci, whether it's on a fashion icon like Marilyn or Jackie O, or sitting unnoticed in a thrift store counter waiting to be snapped up by a lucky buyer. Pucci is usually associated with so-called psychedelic design motifs, but there's another side to his creativity we'll be exploring today. This noble Marquis of Florence, who grew up in a palace surrounded by beautiful things, also loved to travel. He found great inspiration in the art and history of other cultures. Today, it's all about Pucci and Persia. Sit back and watch. We're about to tell a tale where traditional Persian design motifs meet the legendary crown jewels of the Shahs. First, let's take an overview of this scarf. It's sporadically available from online resellers who date it, pretty loosely, to the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Only one of those is right. We'll snoop out its actual date further on in the video. As for the design, it's sometimes known as a bird of paradise scarf. I have no idea if Pucci himself called it that. The archives are quiet as to this particular style. What follows here is original research. You won't find it anywhere else on the internet. If you're an owner or seller who is fortunate enough to own one of these, I hope you enjoy the revelations. Looking closer, what we see most prominently are 2 birds in opposition. They could be any one of a number of species with tufted crowns, quail, peahens, what have you. In fact, they're a specific bird native to the Middle East that has an important role to play in the Quran, Islam's holy book. More on that later. In the corners, we see some odd baton-like objects with curlicues to either side. They could be fancy abstract motifs, but my research indicates there's something more. The center of the scarf has 2 opposing sprays of what look like jeweled nets, topped by feathers. These are crucial to linking the scarf with Persian history. Finally, a flame-like ribbon wraps around our 2 birds. So let's dive in. First, I'd like to try to date this scarf. Our best clue here is the label design. Pucci issued quite a few different labels since the house was founded in 1947. This one, with his name in turquoise script and the care tag in blue capital letters, matches precisely another scarf that I can firmly date to 1973. So I think we can safely say this one dates to the early 1970s. Now about the design. Let's start with the feathered sprays. Where else do we see these sorts of elements? This being Pucci, with his love of luxury and nobility, it seems natural to associate them with some of the most splendid accessories of all time, the crown jewels of the Persian Shahs. You may know of the last Shah, who was deposed by Ayatollah Khomeini in 1979. Before that, he and his wife Faradiba ruled in splendor. This heritage went back centuries to the even more splendid rulers of the Persian Qajar dynasty. We won't get too deep into that rich history, but the crowns of these regions remain a massive attraction in Iran today. What matters here is less the sparkle below, but the toppers, these feather and jewel-encrusted mounts that add that final touch of glory to an already blinged-out headpiece. I believe our scarf represents these crown toppers here. Note too the curled feathers, which mimic other jewels in the royal collection. So that's the sprays. What about the birds? As it happens, these are precise replicas of a 17th century drawing in Berlin's Islamic Museum. This bird is a hoopoe, the fabled messenger of Allah in the Quran. As far back as 1177, it was named the wisest bird in the world by the Persian poet Attar of Nishapur. The format here is as interesting as the species. This is what is called a calagram, made up of calligraphic letters that spell out Bismillah, Allah the All-Powerful. This art form was beloved by the Persian court, and as you can see, it's identical in our scarf. Even the bird's feet form letters, part of the overall design. Moving into the corners, we see these odd implements which are precisely drawn, but mysterious. There's a spatula-shaped something at one end, leading to a ridged column, and then a flared opposite end. Can you guess what they are? Sword hilts? Candlesticks? Perfume bottles? After a bit of digging, it appears that they're in fact musical instruments, horns, known in Farsi, the Persian language, as surnai or zorna. This bit is the reed that the player mouths, much like today's clarinets or oboes. The curlicues may be sound coming out of the holes as it's played, or possibly they're the strings that are typically attached to the instruments. Finally, we have the border. Now that we know about the other design motifs, doesn't this look vaguely like calligraphy? There are a number of ancient Persian scripts that these forms resemble. Wouldn't it be fabulous if they actually said something readable? I don't know Farsi or any of the ancient versions of this language. Possibly one of you could help out. This is a beautiful example of a great vintage scarf with a wonderful story to tell. I hope you enjoyed it. Please press the usual buttons if you'd like to see more.